stories beyond imagination. They're improvising faster than we can adapt.
We don't start wars, we finish them.
The Galactic Concord had endured for over 2,000 years, an alliance so vast that even the brightest nebulae looked small compared to its reach. Within its gilded chambers, wars were a memory, and conflict was treated like an ancient disease long cured. Trade routes were sanctified, disputes arbitrated, and enemies turned into business partners under the iron laws of peace. But the Drathari counselors whispered that peace was not natural. Peace was stagnation. And if peace lasted too long, some species, especially the younger, restless ones, would inevitably begin to dream of conquest. Such whispers coalesced into action when the Drathari Dominion, a race of avian strategists, decided it was time to remind the galaxy what true power looked like. Their scouts had found a frontier world, an insignificant blue planet orbiting a yellow star. Its inhabitants were labeled pre-FTL primitives. That world was Earth. Supreme Talon Commander Valeth of the Drathari stood at the command bridge of the battleship, Ashen Sky. His wings twitched with anticipation as the holographic display projected the image of Earth. Primitive, untamed, vulnerable, he muttered, his beak clicking. We shall crush them quickly, and the galaxy will tremble once again at the Dominion's strength. Around him, sub-commanders squawked approval. Yet, deep beneath their confidence lingered the unease of the unknown. Every galactic archive insisted Earth was nothing more than a backwater, populated by violent mammals who never left their cradle. And yet, Valeth could not ignore that strange phrase that appeared in intercepted transmissions, humankind. It was spoken with pride, defiance, and something else, a flavor he could not quite name. The invasion began with textbook precision. Orbital carriers positioned themselves above Earth's largest cities, unleashing storms of plasma meant to terrify the population into submission before ground forces descended. The Drathari expected screams, panic, and surrender. Instead, what they heard was music. Across their comms, interference filled the channels, guitar riffs, drums, human voices singing in unison. Entire cities blared rock anthems through hacked transmission towers. Soldiers on the ground reported graffiti appearing overnight, painted in brilliant colors. We're still here. We've seen worse. Come and try. The Dominion's psychological warfare had been reversed. The primitives weren't afraid. They were laughing. Confusion deepened when the first ground skirmish began. Dominion shock troopers, armored in obsidian plates, descended into New York expecting chaos. Instead, they were met with civilians carrying weapons cobbled together from drones, repurposed industrial lasers, and even electromagnetic pulse, cannons that should have been beyond their technological level. More disturbingly, the humans seemed to have anticipated their moves, striking supply routes and ambushing dropships. Commander Valeth demanded answers. How could a species still bound to one planet resist soldiers forged in centuries of war? Intelligence reports offered only one explanation. Humanity's history was nothing but war. Unlike other species, whose conflicts ended after unification or interstellar enlightenment, humans had never truly known peace. Millennia of tribal wars, empires clashing, revolutions, world wars, cold wars, conflict was their constant companion. Their entire civilization was a training ground for survival under impossible odds. While other races had forgotten the taste of struggle, humans wore it like a second skin. What the Dominion thought was weakness, being confined to one planet, was, in reality, a crucible. And now that crucible produced warriors unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The Drathari shifted tactics. Instead of shock and awe, they tried surgical strikes on human infrastructure. They bombarded power grids, attempting to cripple communication. But within hours, humans rerouted systems, creating makeshift networks from abandoned satellites, private servers, and even balloons. Valeth's analysts noted with unease that humans thrived under pressure. Every strike that was meant to break them only forced them to innovate faster. As one terrified officer whispered, "They're improvising faster than we can adapt." The Dominion's war machine, built on predictable doctrine, was colliding with the most unpredictable species they had ever encountered. By the third week of invasion, Valith faced an impossible reality, not a single human city had fallen permanently. His forces were bogged down in urban warfare, ambushed in forests, harassed by guerrilla fighters in deserts. Entire fleets were delayed by sabotage. Even worse, human propaganda had spread across the Concord. Species who had long endured dominion, bullying watched shaky holovids of humans, fighting with burning determination, laughing even as bombs fell. A single phrase spread like wildfire through the networks. "We don't start wars, we finish them." The Dominion's allies began to waver. The Crethar mercenaries withdrew their contracts, citing unacceptable risk. The Vakari suppliers refused to deliver munitions, fearing the humans would one day remember who funded their enemies. For the first time in centuries, cracks appeared in the Dominion's unshakable armor of fear. Valith tried to tighten control, but reports grew worse each day. Human resistance was not shrinking, it was evolving. They had begun hacking Dominion drones, turning them against their masters. They even hijacked a Dominion corvette and broadcast the words "free delivery," courtesy of Earth, as they crashed it into an enemy carrier. The tipping point came when human leaders revealed what they had hidden. For decades, Earth had been developing technologies in secret, concealed from galactic sensors. Beneath their oceans lurked submarines capable of launching weapons into orbit. In underground bunkers, particle accelerators had been repurposed into devastating cannons. And in the void above Earth, satellites once thought defunct lit up with coordinated AI systems, forming a planetary defense grid. Humanity had not been idle. They had been preparing, not for conquest, but for the day someone would come to test them. And that day had arrived. When the humans finally struck back in full force, the galaxy watched in disbelief. Ragtag militias merged into organized legions. Engineers became generals overnight. Farmers flew repurposed spacecraft. Entire nations set aside centuries of grudges and fought as one species. Earth became a storm, a living engine of resistance that consumed the Dominion's plans. And as Supreme Talon Commander Valith stood once more at the bridge of the ashen sky, watching his carefully planned war unravel, he finally understood what that strange human word meant: humankind. It was not weakness, not primitive pride. It was the promise that no matter who came for them, humanity would endure, and humanity would fight. The Concord Senate convened in emergency session, their gilded halls echoing with panic. For centuries, they had dismissed humanity as insignificant. Now, reports of Dominion cruisers, being torn apart by human ingenuity, played across the chamber's hollow screens. Delegates shouted over one another. Some demanded intervention. Others whispered of alliance. But above all, there was shock. The humans were not merely surviving, they were winning. What unsettled the Senate most was not their weapons, but their laughter, defiant, mocking, echoing across every intercepted broadcast. The galaxy had never seen a species face annihilation with such fearless joy. Back on Earth, the tide of war transformed cities into fortresses of resilience. In Tokyo, engineers turned skyscrapers into railgun platforms. In Cairo, solar fields powered entire drone fleets. In São Paulo, gangs and militias laid down rivalries to become organized regiments. Humanity had united in ways once thought impossible. Where one nation faltered, another stepped in. Where technology lacked, creativity filled the void. Children carried supplies through tunnels. Grandparents taught guerrilla tactics from wars long past. Earth itself seemed alive, every heartbeat synchronized against the invader. This unity frightened the Dominion more than any weapon. Valith ordered the construction of a blockade, encircling Earth with Dominion warships. Supplies, reinforcements, communication, all were to be cut. The strategy had toppled dozens of worlds before, but Earth was different. Smugglers, hackers, and renegade pilots from across the galaxy began running supplies to the humans. They did not do it for profit, but for something far rarer: inspiration. In hidden corners of the Concord, oppressed species cheered for Earth. They painted human symbols on walls, sang human songs, and whispered human defiance. Humanity had become more than a resistance. They had become a beacon. The blockade began to fracture when humans unveiled a weapon that should not have existed. Rising from the oceans came Colossal submarines, city-sized leviathans, bristling with missiles that could pierce orbital shields. Each launch crippled a Dominion cruiser, tearing holes in their encirclement. Panic spread through the enemy ranks. Valith demanded to know how a primitive world had hidden such technology from galactic sensors. The answer came too late. Humanity's greatest weapon was secrecy. They had been underestimated, written off, ignored. And in that shadow of neglect, they had built nightmares. Desperation drove the Dominion to its darkest plan, planetary annihilation. They prepared a superweapon capable of burning Earth's atmosphere, reducing the cradle of humanity to ash. As the weapon charged, human satellites detected the anomaly. In response, every human stronghold lit up with coordinated strikes. Hackers overloaded the weapon systems. Resistance fighters hijacked Dominion comms to confuse their targeting. Pilots launched suicidal runs against its power cores. In the chaos, one final act of defiance. Stood above all, a group of human astronauts commandeered an obsolete shuttle, packed it with explosives, and rammed it into the weapon. Earth was scarred, but it lived. The galaxy gasped as the Dominion failed. Never in their history had they unleashed their greatest terror and been denied. For the first time, the Dominion looked weak. Rebellions erupted across their occupied worlds. Slaves rose against masters. Soldiers deserted. Entire colonies switched allegiance, claiming allegiance to Earth. The humans did not ask for empire, but empire seemed to form around them regardless. Valith saw his grand dominion unravel not just on Earth, but everywhere. Humanity had ignited something the galaxy had forgotten: courage. In the ruins of Paris, human leaders gathered in a makeshift bunker. Representatives from every continent stood shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by blueprints, stolen alien data, and blood-stained flags. They debated not whether humanity could survive. The answer was clear, but what they would become after survival. Some argued for isolation, retreating once more into their cradle. Others saw opportunity to take humanity's unity to the stars, to ensure no species would ever again suffer under tyranny. Their voices clashed, but their decision was inevitable. Humanity would rise, not as conquerors, but as guardians. When Earth finally launched its counteroffensive beyond its skies, the galaxy trembled. The first human fleet was a patchwork of stolen Dominion vessels, refitted cargo ships, and experimental prototypes long hidden in secret hangars. Against any other foe, it would have looked like a junkyard. But humanity had learned how to turn junkyards into arsenals. Their ships moved unpredictably, fought ruthlessly, and laughed as they tore through Dominion formations. For every human vessel destroyed, two more seemed to appear, crewed by volunteers who refused to sit idle while their species fought for freedom. The Concorde, once passive, found itself caught between fear and hope. Delegates pleaded for neutrality, but others began to secretly funnel resources to Earth. The humans never asked for help. They demanded nothing, but their example was infectious. When a species that had barely touched the stars could resist the most feared empire in the galaxy, what excuse did the rest have? Across the Senate, the old order crumbled. Alliances shifted. For the first time in a millennium, the galaxy's balance of power was not decided by ancient empires, but by a newborn star of humanity's making. Supreme Commander Valith faced a truth he could not escape. His fleets were bleeding, his soldiers mutinied, his enemies multiplied, and yet, what haunted him most was the laughter. Every intercepted human broadcast, every last message, carried that same mocking tone. Humanity did not fear him. They did not respect him. They ridiculed him. To a dominion built on terror, this was unbearable. Empires collapse when their enemies no longer tremble. Valith realized he had already lost long before the first human bullet was fired. In the final battle over the shattered moon of Corvast, humanity and its newfound allies faced the Dominion's last stand. The stars themselves seemed to burn as ships collided. Weapons screamed and fire rained across the void. Amid the chaos, human fleets fought not for conquest, but for closure. They were not there to replace the Dominion, but to end it. And as Valith's flagship burned, pierced by 1,000 defiant strikes, the galaxy knew an age had ended. The Dominion was gone. Humanity had remembered fire, and it had remade the stars. When the war ended, humanity did not claim dominion. They returned to their world, battered but unbroken. Yet they were no longer confined to Earth. Colonies spread across nearby systems, not as conquerors but as explorers. Treaties were signed, alliances forged, enemies reconciled. Species once afraid to speak now spoke freely, emboldened by the humans' example. The conquered reformed, no longer an alliance of stagnation, but of vigilance. Humanity had not saved the galaxy for glory. They had saved it because they could not imagine doing otherwise. Legends grew quickly. Children on distant worlds played games where they pretended to be human soldiers, laughing in the face of impossible odds. Songs were written of Earth's defiance, echoing in markets and spaceports. Statues of anonymous human fighters appeared in liberated colonies, carrying banners that read, "We finish what others start." Humanity had become myth, symbol, and story, woven into the very fabric of the galaxy's memory. Their scars became monuments. Their laughter became scripture. On Earth, life slowly returned to rhythm. Cities were rebuilt. Forests regrew. Oceans healed. Yet the people carried their legacy differently now. No longer were they the overlooked species in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. They were the fire that reignited courage. Veterans told stories to their grandchildren, not of despair, but of the day humanity stood as one. "We did not win because we were strong," they said. "We won because we refused to break." And in that refusal, they found strength greater than empires. And so humanity's story became a warning and a promise. To those who sought conquest, it warned the humans would never kneel. To those who sought hope, it promised humanity would stand with them. The galaxy had changed forever, not by design, but by accident, because one forgotten world dared to laugh in the face of annihilation. And as new stars lit up humanity's maps, the words of their defiance echoed still. We don't start wars. We finish them.
Stories beyond imagination.